It was one of those dark, gloomy evenings when the rain drizzled relentlessly against the windows of Alex's apartment. He had been lounging on his couch, scrolling through his phone with no particular direction in mind. The dull hum of the rain outside mixed with the faint sound of his phone's notifications pinging in the background. It had been a while since anything exciting had happened in his life, and lately he found himself looking for something to break the monotony. Little did he know, that night would change everything. While flicking through his inbox, Alex's eyes caught a strange subject line: a weekend escape to the French countryside. Discover the haunted secrets of Chateau Blackwood. His curiosity immediately piqued, and without much thought, he clicked on the email. Who wouldn't want a free trip to an ancient, haunted mansion in the heart of France? The idea of exploring a real haunted house, the kind of place filled with history, mystery, and dark secrets, was enough to lure him in. After all, Alex was no stranger to horror stories. In fact, he had always been fascinated by the supernatural and the eerie tales that filled the pages of books or haunted the halls of old castles. The email began with an invitation promising a weekend getaway to the infamous Chateau Blackwood, a place like no other, the email declared, steeped in history and rumored to be haunted by more than just its tragic past. Alex's eyes widened with interest as he continued reading. It sounded like something out of a novel, an opportunity to immerse himself in an actual haunted mansion in the French countryside. The message described the chateau's eerie allure, boasting its dark, Gothic architecture, overgrown grounds, and long-forgotten history. Located deep in rural France, far from any bustling cities, the mansion was known for its chilling atmosphere. For centuries, it had been a place where only the brave or the foolish dared to enter. But this was no ordinary haunted house. The email promised a chance to explore its decaying corridors and hidden rooms, uncovering its long-kept secrets. Alex read on. The invitation included an enticing offer: a free weekend stay at the chateau, with all expenses covered, including meals and accommodations. The catch, however, was that the weekend would involve a guided tour of the haunted mansion, led by an expert who would reveal the dark history of the estate. The email also mentioned a series of unexplained events and eerie experiences that previous guests had encountered. Whispers, they said, could be heard echoing through the halls at night, whispers that weren't quite human. The email promised a chance to unlock these secrets for himself, to experience the chilling phenomena firsthand. Yet, amid the excitement, there was an undercurrent of warning in the email. It spoke of the cursed whispers, strange sounds that had terrified previous visitors and had driven some to madness. The message hinted that many who had come to the chateau seeking answers had left with their minds shattered or had simply vanished without a trace. Are you brave enough to discover the truth? The email asked, ending with an ominous note. Those who venture into the darkness of Chateau Blackwood never leave the same. Alex leaned back on the couch, his mind racing. He had always been one for adventure, especially when it came to exploring the unknown, only fueled his curiosity. It was like a puzzle he couldn't resist solving. He thought for a moment, considering the possibilities. On one hand, the idea of staying in a haunted chateau in France was irresistible. On the other, something about the warning in the email made him uneasy. Still, the allure of exploring such a mysterious place was too strong. He imagined the stories he could tell, the experience he could share with his friends and followers. This could be the adventure he had been waiting for, something that would excite his senses and push him out of his comfort zone. With a sigh, Alex shook off the lingering doubts. He clicked the confirmation link at the bottom of the email, accepting the invitation. As soon as the page loaded, a wave of excitement surged through him. The page contained more details about the event, including the itinerary and the names of other participants who had also signed up for the weekend. The tour was scheduled for the following month, giving Alex just enough time to prepare. The email mentioned that the chateau would be entirely exclusive for the group of visitors, and only a handful of people would be allowed inside. This, Alex thought, added to the air of mystery. A private tour of a haunted mansion in one of the most remote corners of France. It was exactly what he had dreamed of. He quickly packed his bags, making a mental note of the essentials: camera, notebook, flashlight, and a healthy dose of skepticism. As much as he was drawn to the supernatural, Alex knew better than to let himself be swept away by fear. He had seen enough horror films and read enough ghost stories to know that the mind could play tricks, and what seemed terrifying in the moment could easily be explained away later. But still, there was something about this invitation that felt different. Something about it felt real. The days leading up to his departure felt like an eternity. As the time drew nearer, Alex found himself growing increasingly excited and a bit apprehensive. He thought about the stories he had read about haunted houses in the past, about the people who had visited places like this, only to leave changed forever. He wondered if this would be just another one of those stories, or if this would be something far worse. When the day finally arrived, Alex set off on his journey. He boarded the plane to France, feeling the weight of his decision settling on him with every passing mile. The flight was long, and as he gazed out the window at the sprawling cities below, Alex couldn't help but think about the chateau. What had happened there all those years ago? What secrets did it hold? The more he thought about it, the more he wanted to know. But as the plane descended toward the small, isolated airport near the chateau, an unsettling feeling began to creep into his thoughts. It wasn't just the rain or the remote location of the mansion. It was something else, a sense of foreboding that seemed to follow him, wrapping itself around him like a heavy fog. Maybe it was the tales from the email or the warning about the whispers. Maybe it was just his imagination running wild. But as Alex stepped off the plane, and made his way toward the car that would take him to the chateau, he knew one thing for sure. He was about to experience something that would change his life forever. Chateau Blackwood was waiting for him. And whatever lay ahead, Alex knew he couldn't turn back now. The moment Alex stepped out of the car, a sudden chill cut through the air, unlike anything he had felt before. The heavy rain had stopped, but the mist hung thick in the air, swirling around the tall, looming figure of the chateau. It was as if the mansion itself was shrouded in a veil of secrecy, trying to hide something, or perhaps protect itself from being seen too clearly. The chateau's Gothic architecture loomed over him, its crumbling stone walls and sharp, angular features, giving it an ancient yet ominous appearance. Dark, narrow windows glistened in the dim light, their panes reflecting the pale moonlight in an unsettling way. It felt as if those windows were eyes, watching him, waiting for his every move. Alex stood frozen for a moment, the sight of the mansion filling him with both awe and a sense of dread. He had seen countless pictures of haunted places before, but this was different. There was something real about this place, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to step forward. The gravel underfoot crunched with every step, as if the ground itself was reluctant to welcome him before he could even reach the large, intricately carved wooden door. It creaked open, the sound so sudden and loud that it made him jump. Standing in the doorway was a woman, draped in black from head to toe. Her attire was simple yet elegant, her dark clothing blending perfectly with the shadows of the chateau. Her face was pale, almost ghostly, and her eyes were sharp, as if she could see through him. "Welcome to Chateau Blackwood," she said softly, her voice smooth but laced with an eerie calmness that made Alex's stomach tighten. "We've been expecting you." Alex managed to nod, his throat suddenly dry. He had expected to meet a guide, maybe a few other guests, but not someone like her. There was something about the way she spoke, something in her tone that set his nerves on edge. "Thank you," he replied, his voice sounding hoarse. "I'm Alex. I received the invitation." Her lips curled into a faint smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yes," she murmured. "We know who you are. ... She stepped aside, motioning for him to enter. As Alex walked past her, he noticed that the door closed with a soft, almost imperceptible click behind him. The sudden change in the temperature was stark. Inside, it was cool, but it wasn't the refreshing kind of cool. It was colder than it should be, as if the house had absorbed the chill from the outside world, and now it was holding onto it tightly. The foyer was vast and dark, the walls adorned with old factories, faded tapestries that seemed to shimmer in the flickering candlelight. The air was thick with the scent of dust, of aged wood and forgotten things. Alex felt as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for him to make the next move. The woman moved silently behind him, her footsteps barely making a sound on the stone floor. "This way," she said, as she led him deeper into the chateau. Her voice was soft, almost like a whisper, but the words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Alex followed her through long, narrow corridors, the walls lined with old paintings that seemed to watch him as he passed. The portraits were of men and women with somber expressions, their eyes following his every movement. The unsettling sensation grew stronger the farther they went. They reached a staircase, narrow and winding, made of stone that seemed to groan under his weight. The stairs led upwards, disappearing into the darkness above. The woman turned to him. "Your room is on the top floor," she said, handing him a large, old-fashioned key that looked like it belonged in another era. "Rest well, for tomorrow we begin the tour. ... Her words seemed to echo in the silence of the chateau, sending an icy shiver down his spine. The way she had said, "Rest well," felt almost like a command, a suggestion that he had no choice but to follow. "Thank you," Alex said, taking the key. But as he turned to climb the stairs, he couldn't help but feel the weight of her gaze on his back, a sense of being watched that he couldn't shake off. The staircase seemed to stretch on forever, the stone steps narrow and uneven. The faint light from the chandelier above flickered intermittently, casting strange, dancing shadows along the walls. It felt as though the stairs were leading him higher into the unknown, into a place where time had no meaning. As he ascended, a cold draft swept past him, sending a chill down his spine. He paused for a moment, looking around. The air was thick, suffocating, as if the house itself was breathing. A faint, unsettling whisper seemed to ride the breeze, but when Alex turned to look, he saw nothing. His pulse quickened, but he shook off the uneasy feeling, telling himself that it was just his imagination. The top floor was just as dark and foreboding as the rest of the house. The narrow hallway stretched out before him, lined with closed doors that looked as if they hadn't been opened in years. The wood beneath his feet creaked under his weight, and the faint scent of mildew mixed with the dust in the air. The silence was almost oppressive, and Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was waiting just out of sight. At the end of the hall, a single door stood ajar, a faint light spilling from the crack. It looked old, worn, the paint chipped in places, revealing the bare wood beneath. Alex's heart raced as he walked toward it, his footsteps echoing loudly in the empty corridor. He reached for the handle, hesitated for a moment, and then turned it. The room was small, almost cramped, with a large, heavy bed in the center. The curtains were drawn tightly over the windows, blocking out any light. The air inside felt stale, as if the room hadn't been used in ages. As Alex stepped inside, He noticed the furniture was old, but well maintained. The bed covered in an intricately designed quilt that seemed out of place in such a neglected room. He set his bag down on the chair beside the window, and as he did, he noticed a mirror hanging on the wall opposite the bed. The frame was ornate, twisted, almost like vines curling around the glass. But what caught his attention was the reflection. For a brief moment, he thought he saw someone standing behind him, just out of the corner of his eye. But when he turned, the room was empty. His heart raced, and he forced himself to look away, dismissing it as nothing more than a trick of the light. He placed the key on the small table beside the bed and then sat down, his mind racing. What had he gotten himself into? He had come here for a thrill, to explore a haunted mansion. But now that he was inside, the reality of the situation felt much different. The whispers, the strange atmosphere, it was all starting to feel too real. Alex lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to calm his thoughts. The sound of the wind outside had picked up again, howling through the trees. But it was the silence inside the house that was more unnerving. It was the kind of silence that made you wonder if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The feeling that something was lurking just beyond his reach wouldn't leave him. As the night deepened, Alex drifted off to sleep, but the uneasy feeling remained, gnawing at the back of his mind. There was something about this place, something he couldn't quite place. He had thought he was prepared for a haunted house experience. But as the darkness closed in around him, Alex realized that Chateau Blackwood wasn't just any haunted house. It was something far more sinister, and he had only just begun to uncover its secrets. The morning after his unsettling arrival, Alex awoke to the sound of birds chirping outside his window, though it didn't do much to shake the eerie atmosphere that lingered throughout the chateau. Despite the faint light that filtered in through the heavy curtains, the house still felt cold, its silence overwhelming. He lay in bed for a while, his thoughts tangled in the events of the previous night. Had it all been a dream? The whispers, the strange presence in the hallway. Was it all just his imagination playing tricks on him? He tried to brush it off, but a nagging feeling refused to leave him. After a quick breakfast in the cavernous dining room, where the dim lighting and long, dark wooden tables gave the place an almost medieval feel, Alex gathered with the other guests for the much-anticipated guided tour. The chateau seemed even more imposing in the daylight, its walls towering and ancient, giving the impression that it had witnessed centuries of sorrow and tragedy. Alex couldn't shake the thought that the house itself was alive, its walls holding secrets that were waiting to be uncovered. The group gathered in the large entryway, and Alex took his place with the others. Some seemed eager, excited for the adventure they were about to experience, while others wore expressions of quiet apprehension. He glanced around at his fellow guests, but no one seemed to be talking much. There was an unspoken understanding that this place was not ordinary, not just another historical landmark to visit for the sake of curiosity. The guests were all here for something more sinister, whether they realized it or not. At the front of the group stood their guide, a man named Pierre. He was an older gentleman, his face etched with age and experience, but his eyes had an unsettling intensity about them. His gaze seemed to pierce through the group, as though he could see into their very souls. His hair was graying at the temples, and his tall, lean frame gave him a regal presence. He wore an old-fashioned suit, complete with a dark waistcoat and a pocket watch that hung from his chest. He greeted the group in a low, gravelly voice. "Good morning. I hope you all rested well, for today we will be exploring the true heart of this chateau." His words sent a ripple of unease through the group. Alex couldn't explain it, but there was something about Pierre that made him feel uneasy. The man's very presence felt heavy, as if he carried the weight of all the secrets of the chateau. He could almost feel the air around him growing thick with tension as Pierre began to speak again. "Many years ago," Pierre started, his voice deepening with each word, "this chateau was home to a wealthy family, the Delacroix family. They were known throughout the region for their wealth, their influence, and their lavish lifestyle. But there was a curse upon them, a curse that plagued every generation. Every time the curse reached its peak, one of their children would disappear mysteriously, never to be seen again." Alex shifted uncomfortably, his attention fully focused on Pierre now. He felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up as the man's words seemed to wrap around him like a tightening noose. The rest of the group was quiet, hanging on to every word. But Alex could tell that the air in the room had changed. It felt denser, colder. Pierre paused for a moment, his gaze sweeping over the group, before he continued. The people believed that the Delacroix family had angered a spirit deep in the woods nearby. A spirit who had been wronged by the family long before. This spirit, it is said, was vengeful. It demanded a life every time the curse came full circle. No one knows the exact details of what happened, but the Delacroix family has never been the same since. Every generation saw one of their children disappear, lost to the curse. It was as if the mansion itself. Alex felt a cold shiver run down his spine as he tried to process what he was hearing. A cursed family? Disappearances every generation? It sounded like the stuff of legends, of stories told around campfires to scare children. But there was something about Pierre's delivery, the weight in his voice, that made it feel real. It was no longer a tale. It was a truth hidden in the darkness of the chateau. Pierre's next words were the ones that truly caught Alex's attention. "But that's not all. The whispers you may have heard in the halls, the ones that seem to follow you wherever you go, they are the voices of the lost, the souls of those who vanished, those who were claimed by the curse. They call out for vengeance, to be remembered, to be freed from the grip of this place. Alex froze, his heart pounding in his chest. But as Pierre's voice grew louder, so did the whispers. They became clearer, sharper, as if they were speaking directly to him. It was a language Alex couldn't understand, but the tone was unmistakable. It was angry, filled with pain and sorrow. He turned quickly, his eyes scanning the room, but there was no one there. No figure, no shape, just the empty, vast space of the chateau. The group around him was still listening intently to Pierre, unaware of the whispers that seemed to be growing louder, more urgent. Alex's chest tightened, and he had to swallow hard to keep his composure. Pierre didn't seem to notice. He continued, his tone almost matter-of-fact. Many have come here hoping to uncover the truth about the Delacroix family and their curse. But those who do, those who dig too deep into the secrets of this place, they never return the same. Some go mad, some leave, but they're never quite the same person. And some disappear, just like the family members before them. Alex's breath caught in his throat. He felt the weight of Pierre's words sink in, settling into his bones like a cold fog. This wasn't just a haunted house. This was something far darker, something much more dangerous than he had anticipated. The curse was real, and it seemed to be alive in the very walls of the chateau, calling to those who dared to uncover its secrets. He glanced nervously around the room again, but the others were still mesmerized by Pierre's storytelling, oblivious to the whispers that were now clearly audible. The air felt heavy, oppressive, as though the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Pierre's voice dropped to a whisper, and Alex leaned in slightly, hanging on every word. "So, my friends," Pierre said, his eyes narrowing, "I must warn you. The Delacroix family's curse is not something to be taken lightly. The house may seem welcoming, but it is only a facade. Beneath it lies a darkness that will claim you if you are not careful. Do not let the whispers fool you. They are not the voices of the dead, but the voices of those who will never find peace until they claim another soul." Alex's pulse quickened as Pierre's words echoed in his mind. The whispers were not just the cries of the lost, but a warning that whoever was willing to listen, whoever dared to dig into the past of this cursed chateau, would be claimed next. As the group moved on, following Pierre down the dark, winding corridors of the chateau, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. The whispers followed him, relentless and deafening, growing louder with every step he took. They weren't just voices anymore. They were a call to join them in the darkness. And the deeper he went into the heart of the chateau, the more he feared that he was too far gone to ever turn back. The night in the chateau was heavier than Alex had anticipated. The weight of the curse, the whispers that he couldn't escape, and the dark history of the mansion all combined to create a sense of dread that clung to him like a second skin. His mind was overwhelmed, turning over the words Pierre had shared earlier. The chilling warning about the Delacroix family and their cursed fate. It all felt like a bad dream. But the terror in the air made it clear this was all too real. He retired to his room, hoping that the stillness of the night would provide some relief. The grand stone walls of the chateau, thick and ancient, were supposed to offer comfort, a sense of safety in the cold, empty halls. But in truth, they only seemed to heighten the sense of isolation. The room was small, the bed large and imposing, its heavy dark wood frame matching the rest of the furniture in the room. The drapes were drawn tightly, blocking out any natural light, and the air felt stagnant, heavy with the smell of dust and age. Alex lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, trying to ignore the coldness that seemed to settle into his bones. His mind wouldn't quiet, spinning with images of the mysterious family, the whispers, and the figure he had glimpsed earlier in the mirror. What was happening? Was he just imagining things? Maybe it was all just a series of tricks his mind was playing on him. The house, the isolation, the stories, they were all beginning to take their toll. He closed his eyes, willing himself to sleep, but it was no use. The silence of the room was suffocating, and the strange, disembodied voices from earlier were creeping back into his thoughts. At first, the whispers were distant, faint, and almost imperceptible. But slowly, they began to grow louder, more distinct. The sounds seemed to come from all directions, echoing in the corners of the room, flowing around him like a cold, suffocating mist. The voices were hushed, unintelligible, but they were unmistakably there. His heart began to pound in his chest as the sounds seemed to fill the entire space, pressing in on him from every angle. The whispers were no longer whispers at all. They were commands, desperate cries for attention, and above all, they were terrifying. Alex shot up in bed, his pulse racing. His breath came in shallow gasps, and he looked around the room in a panic. He couldn't tell where the whispers were coming from, but it felt as if they were inside his head, echoing through his thoughts. His ears rang with the sound of them, growing louder and more urgent. He clutched the sheets in his hands, trying to steady his breath, but it was no use. His mind was unraveling, each whisper pushing him further into madness. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. The whispers vanished as quickly as they had appeared, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. The sudden change was jarring, almost worse than the cacophony that had preceded it. Alex sat still in the bed, straining his ears for any sound. But there was nothing, just the deep, unsettling quiet of the chateau around him. He wanted to believe it was just a trick of his imagination, a symptom of the stress he had been under. But a part of him knew it wasn't. He had felt the chill of the voices. He had heard them too clearly. He tried to shake off the fear, telling himself it was just the atmosphere of the house getting to him. But deep down, he knew the truth. The chateau was alive with something far darker than anything he had imagined. As he began to settle back into the bed, attempting to calm his racing heart, he heard something else. A sound that was unmistakable. The soft creak of the door opening. His eyes snapped open, his body rigid with terror. The room was dark, but the faint light from the hallway cast shadows that danced across the floor, making the space feel even more claustrophobic. Alex held his breath, his heart pounding in his ears. The door creaked open slowly, unnaturally slow, as if the very house was reluctant to allow it. The air grew colder, the chill crawling across his skin, and for a moment, he wondered if he had imagined it. But no, there was no denying it. The door was open, and something was there, standing just outside his room. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry, his voice lost somewhere deep inside him. His body was frozen, unable to move. The shadows gathered in the doorway, and from the darkness, a figure slowly stepped forward. It was draped in black, its form indistinct at first, like a silhouette lost in the gloom. But as it moved closer, Alex could make out the shape of a person, their presence almost tangible. The air grew thick around him, the shadows in the room deepening, swallowing up the little light that remained. The figure was tall and slender, but there was something wrong about it. It wasn't entirely human, not in the way Alex had come to understand. The face was pale, almost ghostly, and utterly devoid of emotion. Its skin was like death itself, cold, smooth, and lifeless. Alex's breath caught in his throat as he took in the figure's glowing eyes, an unnatural light that burned through the dark like twin embers. The eyes seemed to pierce through him, as if they were looking straight into his soul, seeing all of his deepest fears and doubts. A chill ran down his spine, and his body shook as the figure stepped closer, its movements slow and deliberate. Alex couldn't move, couldn't speak. All he could do was stare at the figure, trapped in its gaze. His mind raced with 1,000 questions, but all he could hear was the steady thumping of his own heart in his chest. The figure opened its mouth, and a soft, rasping voice emerged, as though it were a whisper carried on the wind. "You must leave before it's too late." The words hit him like a blow to the chest, but before he could react, the figure's form seemed to blur, to melt into the shadows, as if it were being swallowed whole by the darkness itself. The sound of its voice lingered in the air for a moment, echoing in his mind. But then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. The door was shut, the room was silent, and the only sound left was the frantic beating of Alex's heart. He sat up in bed, breathing heavily, his entire body trembling. His eyes darted around the room, looking for any sign of the figure. But there was nothing. No shadow in the corner. No strange presence lingering in the doorway. The room was empty, just as it had been before. He reached out to the light on the nightstand, flicking the switch. and the soft glow from the lamp illuminated the space around him. But there was no trace of the figure, no sign that anything unusual had happened at all. His mind was reeling. Had it all been a dream? Had he imagined it? He wasn't sure. The figure had felt so real, so present. The chill that had settled in his bones still lingered, as if it hadn't quite left yet. His body shook, though whether from fear or the cold, he couldn't tell. He looked at the door again, half expecting it to open once more, but nothing happened. The silence stretched on, suffocating him in its weight. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was happening. Something was wrong with the chateau, with the whispers and with the figure he had just seen. He didn't know what to believe anymore, but one thing was certain. He was no longer alone in this place, and whatever was haunting the chateau, it was not finished with him yet. As the night pressed on, Alex lay back down in the bed, trying to calm his racing thoughts, but sleep would not come. The figure, the whispers, and the terrible sense of dread all clung to him like shadows that refused to let go. All he could do was lie there, wide-eyed and frozen, waiting for whatever would come next in this house that seemed to be alive with malevolent force. The following day, Alex couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something was not right. As the hours dragged on, it felt as if he was being watched, followed by something that lurked just beyond his vision. His every movement seemed to attract attention from unseen eyes, and no matter how hard he tried to dismiss the thoughts, the unease gnawed at him. It wasn't just the whispers this time. They had grown louder, clearer, more insistent. They felt like they were coming from within the walls, crawling into his ears from every direction. It wasn't as though the whispers were some kind of trick or figment of his imagination anymore. They were real, and they had a purpose. The voices weren't just murmurs or whispers of the cursed family now. There was something else behind them, something darker, something far more sinister that was trying to make itself known. The spirits of the Delacroix family had long been trapped, doomed to haunt this place for eternity. But now Alex could feel an undercurrent of malevolence, a presence that was not the same as the sorrowful ghosts that lingered here. It was as if something ancient and powerful was stirring beneath the surface, waiting for its moment to break free. He spent the day walking around the mansion, trying to distract himself, but it only made the feeling worse. Every corner he turned, every hallway he walked down, the whispers seemed to get louder. At times, they would stop abruptly, only to return with a sharper intensity. They were no longer distant sounds, but words, harsh and filled with anger, begging for something, or perhaps warning him of something far more terrifying. Alex tried to ignore them, tried to stay focused on the details of the tour, but the house seemed to close in on him with every passing minute. It felt like the walls were alive, and the house was a living, breathing entity, slowly drawing him in. As he wandered through one of the darker corridors, he spotted Pierre ahead of him. The older man had a knowing look on his face, as if he had sensed Alex's unease from the moment the whispers began. He didn't turn around or acknowledge Alex immediately, but there was a pause in his step, a subtle shift in his posture that made Alex realize Pierre had been expecting this moment. The older man's face was as stern as ever, but there was something in his eyes now, a deep, haunted look that hinted at something far darker than just the curse of the Delacroix family. Without saying a word, Pierre motioned for Alex to follow him, leading him into a small, dimly lit room at the far end of the mansion. It was isolated, tucked away from the rest of the chateau, and the air in the room felt thick, suffocating. The faint smell of incense lingered in the corners, but it only added to the strange atmosphere that hung heavy in the air. Pierre closed the door behind them, and for a moment, the only sound was the crackling of a dying fire in the hearth. It seemed to take longer than expected for Pierre to speak, as though he was choosing his words carefully. Finally, his low voice broke the silence. "You're hearing them, aren't you?" Pierre asked, his words sharp and direct, though there was an undercurrent of something urgent in his tone. "The whispers. They're getting louder, more insistent. The curse is real, Alex, but there's something you need to understand. It's not just the ghosts of the family anymore. Something much darker is at play here. And you're tied to it. You're not just a bystander in this." Alex's pulse quickened as he took in Pierre's words. He had already suspected that there was more to this place than just the ghosts of the Delacroix family. The whispers were no longer just calls for vengeance or cries of sorrow. They had taken on a deeper, more malevolent tone. But hearing it from Pierre, someone who had lived with the curse and its effects for far longer than Alex had, was both terrifying and overwhelming. Pierre's gaze was fixed on him, and there was a weight in his eyes that Alex had never seen before. A sadness, a resignation, and perhaps even a hint of fear. "The spirit that haunts this place, Alex," Pierre continued, his voice growing softer. "It's not like the others. The Delacroix family's curse may have trapped their souls in this place, but there is another force here, one that predates the family. A spirit that was once bound to the land, long before the mansion was built, long before the Delacroix even set foot here. This spirit is the one behind the whispers, the one that has been pulling the strings all along. It's not just seeking revenge, Alex. It wants something much more. It wants freedom. And you may be the one who will give it to him." The words hit Alex like a punch to the stomach. He could feel the cold sweat forming on the back of his neck as he absorbed what Pierre was telling him. The whispers, the figures in the shadows, the strange occurrences, they were all tied to something far older than just the family's curse. And somehow, Alex had become a part of it. He had been drawn into this malevolent web, unable to escape. Pierre leaned closer, his voice growing even softer, almost as if he was afraid of the very words he was about to speak. This place, this chateau, was built upon ancient ground that had been cursed long before the Delacroix arrived. There are dark forces at work here. Forces that the family awakened when they arrived. The spirit that haunts this mansion isn't a mere ghost. It is something much more powerful. It has been feeding off the family's suffering, their disappearances, and it has been waiting for the right moment to break free. Alex shook his head, his mind spinning with the implications of what Pierre was saying. He had known there was something off about the chateau, but this was far beyond anything he had imagined. A curse that had existed for centuries, a spirit that had been waiting for someone to set it free. But why me? Alex finally managed to ask, his voice shaky. Why am I hearing the whispers? Why now? What does this spirit want with me? Pierre's eyes darkened, and for a moment, Alex could see the weight of years of knowledge and fear in the older man's face. Because, Alex, the spirit has chosen you. It has been watching you. The moment you stepped foot in this house, it knew you were the one who could help it escape. It's not a coincidence that you are hearing the whispers. They are calling to you, trying to reach you, trying to make you understand. The spirit is bound to the house, but it knows it can never be free unless someone is willing to confront it. And that someone is you. Alex's stomach churned as he tried to process Pierre's words. It was like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. He had come to the chateau seeking adventure, seeking the thrill of a haunted house. But now he realized that he was in way over his head. This was no ordinary curse. This was something ancient, something powerful, and it was using him to get what it wanted. Pierre's gaze softened, but there was still fear in his eyes. You have a special connection to the spirits of this place, Alex. The whispers aren't just warnings. They are the voices of those who have been lost, those who have tried to uncover the truth but failed. The spirit wants to be free, and if you don't stop it, it will claim you as its next victim. You must find a way to break the curse before it's too late. The weight of Pierre's words sank deep into Alex's chest, and for the first time since he arrived, he truly understood the gravity of what he was facing. The chateau wasn't just haunted by ghosts or trapped souls. It was a prison, and Alex had unknowingly become part of its twisted design. The curse was real, and if he didn't act fast, he would become just another lost soul, trapped forever within the walls of Chateau Blackwood. But how could he fight something so ancient, so powerful, and more importantly, how could he escape the clutches of the darkness that had already begun to claim him? The weight of the truth that had been revealed to Alex pressed down on him like an immovable force. The chateau, with its crumbling walls and suffocating silence, was no longer just a place of haunting. It was a prison. The spirits, the whispers, and the curse itself had all been tied together in a dark web that Alex could no longer ignore. The only way to break free was to confront the evil that had been festering here for centuries, but he had no idea what the cost would be. That night, something pulled at him, something that could not be ignored. It was as though the house itself was calling him, compelling him to descend into the darkness where the answers lay. The air in his room felt oppressive, heavy with the weight of impending doom. The whispers had grown louder, more distinct, as if the spirits were urging him on, guiding him to the one place where the truth had been hidden for so long, the basement. He could feel the pull of the chateau's energy, like an invisible thread tugging at his chest, drawing him closer to the heart of its dark power. Alex moved quietly through the dark hallways, each step echoing loudly in the stillness of the house. The faint light from the flickering candles in the corridors barely illuminated the path ahead, casting long shadows that seemed to twist and writhe with life of their own. The air grew colder the farther he went, a chill that seeped deep into his bones. He could hear the whispers again, this time more insistent, louder than before. They were like a chorus of voices, each one carrying the same warning, the same desperate plea for release. He tried to push the fear aside, focusing only on the task at hand. But every corner seemed to hold something new, a shape, a sound, a fleeting shadow that vanished as soon as he turned to look. When he finally reached the basement, he hesitated at the top of the stairs. The door to the cellar was old, its wood warped and cracked, as though it hadn't been opened in years. Alex's hand trembled as he reached for the handle, the coldness of the metal sending a jolt of unease through him. He turned the knob, and the door creaked open with an almost otherworldly groan. The air in the basement was thick with the smell of decay and dust, and the faintest sound of dripping water echoed through the empty space. The stone walls seemed to close in around him, the oppressive darkness making it hard to breathe. The whispers were louder now, almost deafening, and Alex had to force himself to take each step carefully, his heart pounding in his chest. The basement was a labyrinth of forgotten corners and neglected crates. But something in the back of his mind told him that he was getting closer to the heart of it all. The whispers had been guiding him, pulling him towards this very place. He moved through the dark, his flashlight beam dancing across the old wooden beams and damp stone floors. His hand clenched tighter around the flashlight, and then his eyes fell upon it. The chest. It sat in the farthest corner of the room, covered in a thick layer of dust, its edges darkened with age. It was old, ancient even, and it radiated a sense of dread that Alex couldn't shake. As he approached, the whispers grew louder, almost frantic, as if the chateau itself was aware of what he was about to do. His fingers shook as he reached out to touch the chest, feeling the cold wood beneath his fingertips. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever he was about to uncover. He pulled the chest open with a creak, and the moment it was ajar, a sudden rush of air swept past him, carrying with it a rancid, musty odor that made him gag. Inside the chest, beneath the thick layers of dust, lay an ancient book, its cover darkened with age, and its pages yellowed and brittle. The moment his fingers brushed the book, a jolt of energy shot through him, and for a moment, the entire room seemed to pulse with life. The whispers in the air turned into screams, echoing through the basement as if the very walls were crying out. Alex's heart raced, but he forced himself to open the book. The pages cracked under his touch, revealing old, faded writing in a language he couldn't understand. But there, among the pages, was something that caught his attention, a ritual. A dark, ancient ritual that, if completed, could break the curse that had bound the Delacroix family for generations. His eyes widened as he read the words. The ritual was clear, the steps precise. But there was a catch. To release the trapped spirits of the Delacroix family and break the curse once and for all, one soul would have to remain trapped in the chateau forever. One life sacrificed to free the others. Alex's stomach churned as the realization hit him. The price for freedom, for peace, was a soul. His soul. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him like a physical force. The spirits, the whispers, the ghosts of the cursed family, they had all been trapped here, suffering in eternal torment, unable to escape the clutches of the curse. But to release them, someone would have to take their place. The basement seemed to darken even further. The air thick with the tension of the decision Alex had to make. He had come here to uncover the truth, to find a way to end the suffering of the spirits that had haunted the chateau for so long. But now, the truth had a cost, and that cost was his life. As he stared at the book, the whispers became deafening, their words swirling around him like a whirlwind. Some pleaded for freedom. Others begged him not to do it. But all of them, every single voice, was desperate. Alex's head swam, and for a moment he felt himself teetering on the edge of madness. The walls seemed to close in on him, the chateau's energy growing more oppressive with each passing second. The spirits, the curse, it was all too much to bear. But in the back of his mind, he knew what he had to do. He had come this far, and the only way to break the curse, to free the souls trapped within these walls, was to follow through with the ritual. He wasn't sure what would happen after he completed it, but he knew that if he didn't act, the curse would remain, and the whispers would never stop. The spirits would never be free, and neither would he. With trembling hands, Alex recited the final words of the ritual, his voice barely a whisper against the cacophony of screams around him. As he spoke, the air in the basement grew thick with darkness. The walls seemed to crack, the floor groaning as though the very foundation of the chateau was beginning to collapse. The ghosts of the Delacroix family surrounded him, their faces twisted in agony, their eyes pleading for release. The darkness closed in on Alex, swallowing him whole. The temperature in the room dropped, and he felt a chill deep in his bones, as though the very essence of the chateau was draining his life force away. The screams intensified, a chorus of torment that echoed in his ears. But Alex held firm. He had made his choice, and there was no turning back. The final word of the ritual left his lips, and as it did, the darkness seemed to implode inward, the chateau shuddering violently, as though it were in the throes of some final, desperate death. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it all stopped. The air cleared, the whispers ceased, and an overwhelming silence filled the basement. Alex blinked, his heart pounding in his chest. The weight of the curse, the oppressive presence of the spirits, was gone. The chateau had fallen silent. The air felt lighter, as if the house had finally exhaled after centuries of holding its breath. But as Alex tried to stand, to move toward the door, he realized something terrifying. The basement had changed. The door, the stairs, they were all gone. The chateau had claimed him. The whispers had stopped, but the chateau was now his prison. His body trembled with realization as the cold, heavy air wrapped around him once again. He had freed the spirits, but in doing so, he had sealed his fate. The curse had claimed its price, and Alex would remain trapped within the chateau forever. No matter how hard he tried, there was no escape. The whispers had stopped, but the price of freedom was eternal torment. He had broken the curse, but in the process, he had become a part of it. The mansion had claimed him, and the whispers, now silent, would never leave. He was its new prisoner, forever.